Disaster Recovery Planning for Oracle Enterprise Applications. My name is Lisa Tandy. I work in marketing for data intensity, and before we begin, there are a few items I'd like to review. Today's webinar is scheduled to run for about 45 minutes. During the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode, but we will conduct a Q&A session at the end. Questions can be submitted at any time using the question window on the right-hand side of the webinar interface. Today's session is being recorded, and we will email you a link when the recording becomes available. Our speakers today are Mark Shelipov and Oleg Pitnichenko. Mark is the Director of Application Engineering Services, and Oleg is a Principal Solution Architect at Data Intensity. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Hello, everyone. I would like to announce the agenda for today's webinar. There is a topics what we're gonna focus on. It's a webinar goals, terminology, justifying DR spend, market trends in DR, infrastructure considerations, database and application DR options, testing and recovery considerations. Goal of this webinar is to talk about DR and raise awareness about disconnect, because there is some disconnect across our customer base for customers who have true DR needs and capabilities, and rising the number of DR incidents across the remote customer base. And also to help you to justify return of investment on disaster recovery initiatives. And also we will try to provide maximum information for implementation options. Let's talk a little bit about DR terminology. There is some abbreviations for what we need to discuss. It's a RTO, recovery time objective, the maximum amount of time to restore service to the system. RPO, recovery point objective, is the maximum data loss expected for the system. Hot standby, supported application and service are closely in sync with production system using the software or hardware replication technologies. A cold standby, servers are available and online, and supported applications are restored using the latest available backups. There is a few maybe misunderstanding what is a business continuity and disaster recovery. Business continuity planning is focused on overall strategy for keeping a business operating. It's a global strategy. And disaster recovery planning is focused on the act of recovering specific technologies so that business processes will remain interrupted. And a good business continuity plan will incorporate disaster recovery scenarios for all key systems and locations. This webinar will be focused on disaster recovery, not on business continuity. Okay. Why do you need a DR plan? There is a few components what actually we're gonna overview in this webinar. Applications, middleware, and databases. And what kind of failure can happen for making effect to those components? And this is a list. We try to, it's not everything what can be failed, but believe me, there is a maybe even bigger list, but we're focusing on the infrastructure, server infrastructure, network storage infrastructure, virtualization, and of course, there is maybe global disaster like a Mother Nature, the earthquake, tornado, tsunami, whatever. And also, there is we're not included because we're not included this option here. It's a sabotage, but sabotage can make effect to any of these failures. And we're not going to focus on catastrophic events because most of disaster recovery events are triggered not by Mother Nature. They are triggered by software and human errors. And while modern storage technology is built to withstand multiple types of failures, it's still based on a software. And virtualization technologies also have a tons of built-in capabilities for high availability, fault tolerance, but it's also software. And high availability database technologies like Oracle RAC are designed to protect against the hardware failures, but not against the bugs inside the Oracle RAC. First of all, we're starting from the beginning, right? You need to build a plan. Even if you're not responsible for company overall business continuity plan, you can still make a difference and raise awareness. Develop a list of key applications, including the integrations between them and integrations with external applications. Create a risk matrix to know where is the weakness and what the applications will be impacted. Work with the business to define best case and worst case RPO and RTO numbers, and develop a cost model for each case. What does it mean on the risk matrix? It's a communicate risk to the business. It's a list of potential failure points, match the failure points with the protection, and use the traffic lights to highlight the area where is the weakest to management and communicate to the business. For all high priority risks, you need to multiply across in order to calculate the likelihood of the failure. What kind of factors can make effect to your DR planning? First of all, of course, RPO and RTO should be based on the business requirements as well as on compliance and industry standards. For example, for businesses who is working in healthcare area, there is a HIPAA compliances for business continuity and disaster recovery, what's strictly enforcing for all businesses running there. Another factor is a geographic diversity. Of course, if you would like to set up a DR location in remote and in other geographical areas, make sure you have experienced staff in this DR location, because in the case of DR, you will need the real hands in this location, not flying out from the primary. And scalability. We will focus on scalability later on as well, but overall, your DR center should have capacity to scale from base configuration to the production level in case of emergency. And flexibility, your DR center should be flexible for different DR solution and different DR options, especially if you need some custom or third-party solutions. So let's review some market trends, what's in the on DR market right now. There is generally three trends what we can discuss. It's a cloud services, virtualization, and managed DR. Cloud services, when you can keep disaster recovery in a cloud, it will give you lower cost, faster, more flexible recovery solution for backing up the data. Virtualization, it allows the businesses potentially to create image of entire data center or just for separate systems and quickly activate when needed. And managed DR, it's mostly allows organization who don't keep the experienced staff in the DR data center. And DR recovery should be managed and delivered by third-party providers or professional who is entirely focused only on DR. Because you doing your business in different areas, you should not have specialists exactly focused on DR, and you can work with the third-party providers. Infrastructure considerations. To support storage replications, you need to have identical or same family storages in both locations. To support production load, you should have scalable server solutions. And definitely a key component is networking between your primary and DR data center. It should be robust and flexible. It should have QoS for data replication. It's enough bandwidth for support required RPO, and better but not mandatory to have a global balancing between the data centers. Currently, I would like to ask you, to all attendants, to participate in our poll about the DR existence, what the currently you have, and what kind of DR. Okay, thank you for participation in the poll. And now I would like to ask our principal architect, Oleg Petnichka, to continue with Oracle Enterprise Application DR options.
Hello, everybody. My name is Oleg. I'll discuss what Oracle and data intensity has for maximum availability for DR. So in general, there are three general options of doing like general standard maximum availability options for DR. First one is a good old backup restore. The second one is to use vendors. In our case, it's Oracle database and application specific maximum availability options. And the third commonly used option is to use third-party solutions, meaning solutions from storage vendors, network vendors, and virtualization vendors. Let's talk a little bit about standard Oracle offerings for database maximum availabilities for DR. So first option is plain old backup restore. So we take a backup of your production environment, we ship it off-site, or we ship it to DR location. And in case of DR event, in case our backups are stored off-site, we ship them back either to original location or to DR location. In case your backups are synchronized or replicated to DR location, we just take them there and restore the environment at new production location. So obviously, this solution has a relatively big RPO, recovery point objective, which means you will lose some data. And how much data you lose depends on how frequently you take your backups and how frequently you ship them off your production system. So the more frequently you schedule for backups, the smaller the RPO is. And this solution also has relatively big RTO, recovery time objective, which means it will take some time to get to your backups in case they have to be shipped from third party. For example, your off-site location is Iron Mountain. You'll have to contact vendor. They'll have to ship your backups to a location you specify, and then you'll have to stage it, restore it, and reconfigure your system. That will take time. This solution is relatively easy to implement. You don't need any additional software other than standard backup software you're already using. It has relatively low cost. Again, it does not require additional Oracle licenses because you will not have running environment at DR location. It will only be activated during the DR event. And for your DR test with Oracle, you have up to 10 days to run your environment at backup location. So again, you will not need additional licenses from Oracle. And this is basically a must-have solution. This is starting point for any DR plan. You have to have a backup. You have to ship it off your production system, period. No data in backup location regardless how much money you have, regardless how many resources you have, regardless whether you have DR location or not, if you don't have your backups off-site, you will lose data. And this will be a catastrophic event for your business. The second solution for your database is DataGuard, Oracle DataGuard. I'm not going to go into details of DataGuard implementation, or I'm not going to go into details of describing how it works. Just in general, this solution has relatively low or very low RPO, depending on your DataGuard configuration. If your DataGuard is configured with maximum protection, you will not lose a single transaction. If your DataGuard configuration is configured with maximum performance configuration, you might lose some transaction, but not very big amount of transaction. This solution also has relatively short to recovery time objective, mainly because you don't have to restore anything. Your standby database is already running at your DR location. All you need in case of disaster recovery event is to apply archive logs from your production environment, or archive logs that you can survive, or that you can get from failed production environment. Reconfigure a system to make it primary, activate your database, and then you'll do reconfiguration of application part. We'll touch base on this later in this presentation. This solution is moderate to difficult to implement and manage. It requires some expertise. It requires standby environment at your DR site to be up and running, which means it has to be managed, it has to be backed up, it has to be tested, it has to be monitored. That involves additional costs. The costs, again, are higher than a backup restore solution. This solution requires additional Oracle licenses for DR location, for database at DR location. There are some tricks how to save on licenses, and again, we'll touch base on these tricks later on in this presentation. But again, you will be required to have proper Oracle licenses for your standby database or multiple standby databases running at DR location. You can probably offset a little bit costs associated with licensing at DR location if you use your standby environment for reporting. But this will, again, it's kind of win-lose. You may use a standby environment. There are ways to use standby environment for reporting, but that will require additional licenses. So you can use it, but you will pay Oracle for being able to use it. This will require, for example, active DataGuard option, which costs money. Next solution from Oracle is Golden Gate. This is probably the most expensive, but at the same time the most flexible solution for maximum availability for DR. It has similar RPO and RTO to DataGuard. It is very flexible. It supports multi-vendor replication in theory, for example, from Oracle to a database of other vendor. It supports multi-site replication. It supports active-passive, active-active configuration. It also supports one-way or two-way, multi-way synchronizations. And this synchronization can be both full synchronization of full database or partial synchronization when you synchronize only a subset of your data, not whole database. The downside is it is difficult to implement, it is difficult to manage, and not all applications are supported. For example, the e-business suite is not certified for Golden Gate for full replication. It is only certified if you are going to use Golden Gate for building your reporting environment. But again, you will not be able to use Golden Gate to build DR for your e-business suite database. It might work for other applications. This is expensive solution because again, it is difficult to manage, it is difficult to implement, it requires advanced expertise. It requires additional Oracle licenses, which are not cheap. But again, as with DataGuard, you can offset cost of this solution by using your DR environment for reporting or for some other functionality. And the last option, like commonly used option for maximum availability with DR for Oracle database is third-party solution, for example, storage replication. There are solutions from storage vendors as a 3PAR or from NetApp. For example, for NetApp, it's a SnapDrive and SMO Snap Manager for Oracle, which allows to take a snapshots on a master production site and then replicate them to DR location, and being able to bring up an environment at DR location using snapshot and snap mirrors. It is relatively flexible. It might have flexible to low RPO or RTO depending on your synchronization schedule. How frequently you take a snapshot on a production environment, what is your synchronization schedule for replicating these snapshots to DR environment. It is moderate to low to moderate cost to implement and manage. Again, depending on technology you use. It might require additional licenses from third-party vendors. For example, you'll have, if you're using NetApp, you'll have to buy a specific option for NetApp. You'll have to license SnapDrive, SMO Snap Manager for Oracle. Obviously, it requires deep integration with hosting infrastructure because now you're not just managing your Oracle services or Oracle database, you also have to manage storage. And you'll also have to manage your network. When properly designed and implemented, though, it might provide some benefits. It can reduce overhead, performance overhead on your hosting infrastructure. In the next slide, we'll discuss standard Oracle application maximum availability options for DR, meaning options provided by Oracle for middleware and for application services. Again, the first option is basic backup restore. It works for applications that support it. Not all applications can be easily restored and reconfigured on new hardware with new host names in new data centers. Example of this software could be, for example, SOA, Agile. You cannot simply take your binary backup of your binaries, SOA binaries, and restore it on new host with new host name. And it's going to be very difficult to make it work and to bring it up to reconfigure. But there are some applications that can be easily reconfigured. For example, Oracle e-business suite. The procedure of restoring e-business suite middle tiers on new hardware, on new location, with new web entries, with new host names is well known, well documented, and in our case, it's pretty much automated, scripted, and documented. So this solution has a big RPO RTO, which depends on, again, how frequently you take backups and how frequently you ship them off to your DR location. It is easy, relatively easy to implement. Again, all you need is to make sure you take backups, make sure you ship them offline, offsite, and make sure those backups are available in case of disaster. The cost is moderate to low. Again, we're dealing with backups and with restores. Downside is, again, not all applications can be easily reconfigured, but those that can, no problems with them. And the business suite is an example of application that can be easily restored and easily reconfigured on new hardware. It is a must-have, again, the starting point for any DR plan. No backup, you won't be able to restore. No matter how good your plan is, if you don't have backups, you pretty much curse yourself, to lose your business, to lose your most critical data. So the next option from Oracle is multi-site distributed deployment of your applications. This will work for applications that support it. For example, let's say if you have SOA middleware, it can be deployed in multi-site configuration when you have a few middle tiers running in one data center pointing to your production database, and at the same time your distributed cluster has few middle tiers running in different data center, again, up and running, but still pointing to the same database and the primary location. In case of failure, you move your database using data guard or backup restore to new location, and you just repoint your middle tiers to database and new location. And since you have two sets of middleware, one in production facility and another one in DR facility, one of them will still be up, and all you will need to do is take care of your database and reconfigure your web entries, and you're good to go. This is a solution with low RPO. Obviously, you'll have to have production environment and DR environment at DR location pre-installed and pre-configured. And this solution also has relatively low RTO, recovery time objective, because in case of disaster, all you need to do is reconfigure your middle tiers, point them to new database at DR location, reconfigure web entries, and you've got to go. It is difficult to implement and manage, and there are many things that might go wrong. By difficult to manage, into the life cycle of application configured in multi-site deployment is very complex. If you have to patch it, if you have to upgrade it, you have to remember that you have software installed in multiple locations, and you'll have to follow special procedures how to patch it, how to upgrade it. This is obviously a high-cost solution. It requires additional licenses, again, because you'll have services that have to be licensed to be running at your DR location. This option requires explicit support from your application, and in case of SOA, it is supported by Oracle configuration. And you can see example for SOA. The link is embedded in a presentation which you get at the end of the presentation. Then another option for Oracle application middle tiers supported by Oracle is so-called sandbox DR. This is a solution that Oracle recommends for applications that cannot be easily reconfigured on new hardware in new data center. The way it works, you take a backup of your middle tier binaries, you take a backup of your operation system, and at DR location, you either take image of your operation system and restore it as is with the same host names and preferably with the same IP addresses, but it's not mandatory. And then you restore a snapshot of your application binaries. The point is you bring up your application middle tier in exactly the same configuration up to the host name and preferably up to the IP address as you had at your primary location. In this case, you don't have to deal with reconfiguration of your middle tier. This can be the only solution for applications that are difficult to reconfigure or impossible to reconfigure. This solution has moderate to high cost. It will not require additional licenses because you will not have Oracle services running at DR location up to the point when you need to bring them up, but it might require additional licensing for third-party vendor. For example, if you're doing replication of your VM images using NetApp or using the Oracle ZFS appliance, you will need corresponding licenses to be able to do this replication. The downside of this solution is it is difficult to test without disrupting of your production system. Basically, the way you test it is you shut down your production environment, you complete replication and synchronization to the DR side, and then you bring up images of your production environment at the DR location. The example of such solution is also provided as a link on this slide. You will get a copy of this presentation at the end. And then the last solution, again, is third-party solution for replicating storage. It's flexible. It's similar to a solution we discussed for Oracle database. Has flexible RPO, RTO depending on your synchronization schedule. It is low to moderate cost. Again, depending on technology used. It might require additional licensing from third-party vendors, from 3PAR or from Oracle if you're using DFS appliance, or for NetApp if you're using NetApp, Snapdrive, SMO, SnapMirror. It requires support and deep integration with hosting infrastructure because the data replication and synchronization will be done on your storage tier. And again, when properly designed and implemented, it will provide benefit of low overhead on your hosting infrastructure. Now, what data intensity offers for maximum ability options for your DR? We do have 3 options. The third one is not on the list. So we have basic DR, enhanced DR, and we can also provide custom solution, which is out of scope of this presentation. Basic DR is for database. We're taking backups of your database and replicate them to the DR location. So they're sitting there waiting to be used in case of test or in case of a real DR event. On the application tiers, middle tiers, again, we're taking backups of your application middle tiers and replicating them to DR side. Again, they're sitting there and waiting. And we're using DR automation to streamline initial provisioning of DR infrastructure, to simplify DR restore tests so we don't have to do them manually, to speed up restore reconfiguration in case of real DR event, and to eliminate or reduce possibility of human errors, because all we know, the weakest link in any plan is a human. And the only way to reduce possibility of errors is to document and automate everything as much as possible, and that's our ultimate goal. The enhanced DR option from data intensity on database tier is a data guard, Oracle data guard, standard, nothing new. On application tier is a storage replication, so we replicate your application binaries from your production location to DR location, and they're sitting there waiting for use to be used in case of test or in case of real DR event. And we also rely on DR automation again to streamline initial deployment and rebuild, to streamline initial deployment of your DR environment, and to simplify rebuild after DR event or after DR test. To simplify switchover and failover tests. Again, we don't want to waste time and do it differently. Every time we do tests, we want to rely on automation as much as possible. And we also rely on automation to speed up switchover, failover in case of real DR event. And also to eliminate and reduce possibility of human errors. And I want to stress that automation that we use is a very important part of our DR plan. We all know that when disaster happens, there is always no time, there is always not enough resources, not enough people, and the more the more things we can do with automated solution, the easier it's going to be for us and for our customers to restore in case of DR. And I want to...
Okay, thank you, Oleg. Now we would like to talk about how to test existing DR solution. because without testing you cannot prove you have, in case of real emergency, you will be recovered after disaster. There is a few variants for few options for the DR test. Full DR test and partial DR test. Full DR test can be failover or switchover. What is the difference between failover and switchover? Failover test also should include the timing to rebuild original system. It's you testing not only to failover to DR, you testing also how much time you need to do for rebuild original primary system. Switchover is mostly testing your ability and timing, and it's a completion of switchover to the DR location, working in DR location, and switchover back to the primary location. It means primary location not completely destroyed. It's available and you don't need to rebuild most of the things. But anyway, for full DR, failover or switchover, doesn't matter. Your production system will be stopped and not available. All your end users, business users, will do real transactions in a DR location. And also, it requires to have failover or switchover back plan, how you're gonna be back in your original primary location and when you're gonna be back. And partial DR test is more soft for end users. Your primary production system is up and running and your end business users still working and doing transactions as usual. Your DR copy is available only for specific testers or subject matter experts. Potentially, of course, your like 15 QAs and 5 SMEs cannot simulate production load. And in this case, it's potentially possible to generate like production load by using stress testing tools like Load Runner and some other testing solutions. Data intensity provided separate package was not in our presentation yet, separate package how to do the stress testing. And now I would like ask you to participate in another poll regarding your DR tests. It's a first, it's a DR test frequency, and second, it's a DR test type. Okay, thank you for participation in those polls. And now let's review a consideration for DR tests. For full DR tests, what need to be considered? It's a network services availability. Your Active Directory, DNS, load balancing should be available at the primary and DR location for switchover test. For failover test, only in DR location. And switchover back plan, it's need to be discussed and need to be reviewed, and you should have it. How you gonna be back in your original system. And scalability to support production load. If all your business users will do real transactions, your DR system should be scalable to support real work and real load. For long-term switchover test, is it better to have DR pre-provisioned up to production side, and in this case you don't need to do you don't need to scale it on the fly. For partial DR test, main issue, make sure it's isolated from your production users and transactions. They cannot connect if they don't have permission to connect. And there is a bunch of options how you can do isolation on the network level or using special virtual farm to connect and special network relay and the password protection and whatever. But anyway, this is what needs to be discussed at first for partial test. Your production system is up and running, and end users should not go to DR system when you're doing DR test. Test restrictions. Not all business processes can be tested on a partial test. For example, if you have isolated business process like payroll, of course it can be tested there. But if your system business process, what you would like to test is integrated tightly with a third-party system or with external payment system, make sure you have those interfaces to be duplicated, not from production system, to make sure you're not doing payments, test payments what will go to the real payment external systems. And highly recommended to have stress test planning, because otherwise how you know your partial test is adequate to the production load. So there's a few tips and tricks. It's based on our DI previous experience with the DR tests and DR solution building. Virtualize your DR environment as much as you can. What are the benefits you will get from that? It will minimize your Oracle license fee. For example, to run DataGuard on a DR site, you need only 2 virtual CPUs on DR database box. It's more than enough to apply archive logs what's coming, what's shipped from the primary location. It's during the real regular days, you only what your DR system doing is shipping the logs and applying it in DR. And in this case, why you need to scale it for the full CPUs. But from other side, in case of emergency, you need to scale it pretty fast. In this case, use a beefy host for DR Cloud to scale guest VMs in case of emergency. But again, there is all buts after that. Use hard partitioning for the guest VMs. Oracle doesn't support this option for VMware. It's only for Oracle VM. And it will prevent you from the Oracle requirements to pay for the all-host CPU. For example, your host has 24 CPU cores. And if you install VMware and start VM with only 2 virtual CPUs, Oracle will ask you to pay for all 24. If you start Oracle VM and do the hard partitioning, Oracle will charge you only for 2 vCPUs. Manage compression. It's another trick. Manage compression. There is another trick. It's mostly used for Exadata customers. If you have Exadata on your primary side, you can use commodity hardware with Oracle ZFS on your DR side, and your hybrid columnar compression will be supported in your DR as well. Use DR location as place for non-production systems. When you can split your production and non-production between the 2 data centers, and you can use your non-production system with dual purposes. One is non-production, it's a clones of your production, and another one, in case of DR event, it will be your DR system. Read the fine print. Oracle support agreement allows you to use a full capacity for DR test. Full capacity means exactly what you have on your production. For DR test, 10 days per calendar year. And the last one, write your DR plans and test them. And written plans should be on a copy-paste level of details if you cannot automate DR. As Oleg mentioned before, we're trying to automate as much as we can. If we cannot automate, it will be copy-paste level of details in the plans, because you will have no time to understand if it's just general instructions there. After the DR test, make sure you review with the DR test logs, and better if these test logs will be time-stamped per each step what's been done, and it will give you some view of timing perspective. This is mostly all of our webinars. All questions can be asked right now, and we're waiting for your questions. Thank you for attention to our webinar.
Okay, our first question is, we have an unlimited budget. What is the solution you would recommend, highest protection and MAA for lowest RPO, RTO for EBS?
Okay, so this is Oleg. Yeah, if I understand correctly, so the question is recommended solution with highest protection for a business suite. So to get highest protection, you want to make sure that you are protected even at the times when you are building your DR or rebuilding your DR environment or reconfiguring it, or when you're doing tests, which means this can only be achieved if you have at least, in case of Oracle database, if you have at least your data guard configuration with 3 databases, 1 primary and 2 standby at different locations. In this case, even when you are rebuilding one of your DR databases, your production environment is still protected. In case when you are doing DR test, failover test, or switchover test, and something goes wrong with the DR environment which you are testing, your production environment is still protected. So this is basically the DR solution with maximum protection. The downside, obviously, you'll have to triple, your expenses will basically triple, both infrastructure-wise and licensing-wise. But there are ways how to save it. For example, you can probably use one of your standby environments for reporting or for testing or for some other things. But again, that's the configuration with maximum protection. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Okay. The second question we have is it possible to get 0 hours RPO?
Okay. The 0 hours RPO is achievable. Obviously, for database, it will require data guard, Oracle data guard solution, and not just simple Oracle data guard. It has to be data guard configured in maximum protection mode, which means the transaction on production environment in production database is not considered committed until it is shipped to standby environment and applied to standby environment. This has obviously cons and pros. It gives you maximum protection, which means no committed transactions will be lost. but the downside is it is very sensible to link between your production and standby. So basically, they have to be really close to each other, preferably in the same data center, which means it will not give you the highest protection in case of data center failure. Usually, this configuration is used when you have the data guard configuration with three databases, production, near standby in maximum protection mode, and far standby in maximum performance mode. But again, that's the configuration in which you can get 0 hours recovery point objective with 0 data loss. Thank you.
Okay. Another question, any DR benefits to 12C?
Okay. Well, 12C, among other interesting things, interesting improvements, has a few things that give benefit for DR solution. Probably the most interesting part is so-called far sync. It allows you to have data guard configuration with maximum protection without involving additional expenses on the infrastructure. Basically, you are building your so-called far sync standby environment, which is very thin. Its only purpose is to receive archive and redo logs from production environment as quick as possible. Once this information is received, the production receives notification that transaction can be committed. But the point of this far sync environment is you don't have to keep set of data files. You don't have full-blown stand-up database. The only purpose of this instance or of this system is to receive archive logs and redos from production, and then at a later time in asynchronous mode to ship it over to standby environment in remote location. So that's probably the most important feature of 12C. There are also some other improvements, for example, global database services, which allow to treat your data guard or Golden Gate configuration as one global service, and that gives benefit for client instead of setting up connection to your production environment and then separate connection descriptor for your standby at different location. You can have single connection descriptor pointing to your global data service, and in case of failure, when you switch over or fail over to your standby database, you basically don't have to do any reconfigurations on your client. These are probably two most important data guard DR-related features in 12C. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Oleg. It looks like those are all the questions we have. Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Oleg. If we didn't get to any other questions you have, we'll follow up with you directly after the session. We hope you enjoyed the presentation, and you'll receive an email that contains the link to the session recording as soon as it is available. On behalf of Mark, Oleg, and Data Intensity, thank you for attending. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.